everybody, I'm Jacki Jing with Yen Press, and I am speaking with TurtleMe, the creator of The Beginning After the End, web novel turned webcomic turned anime. Super excited to be speaking with you.
Excited to be here, thank you.
Yay! Okay, so let's just go right into it. And I think a lot of people are really astounded by the progression that you've had. We've typically seen it in the East, but you're doing this in the West. How does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I read a lot of manga and light novels, so being able to kind of take that journey out here in the States, that's been a real, humbling experience. There's no instructions for this. There's no guide on how I can best do this, so it's been a learning experience, but I'm glad that I have a lot of partners helping me along the way.
I would love to know, so were you a kid and you were just like, I want to write this, or were you in your teens, or like when did you have that spark and you're like, okay, this is gonna happen, I'm doing this?
That's a great question. I think honestly, from middle school to high school, I did not have any aspirations to be a writer. It was just more so I really liked reading. Fantasy, graphic novels, especially fantasy. I just really love diving into those worlds. So it kind of started off there. It got to a point where, once I graduated college and I was in my career, I had some extra time after work and I was like, I read a lot, let me try writing. And it just was like it was a hobby, right? It was just something that I picked up, but I never realized how big it would get.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was never intentional. There was no journey, there was no intention along the way. It was just really, I just kind of went with it.
So you were really just like having fun and it was just a hobby?
Yeah, exactly.
And you just started posting it online, and then was there a moment when you were like, oh, this is special?
Well, not a moment where I thought this was special specifically, but I would say that after a certain point, and I realized that there were a lot of readers kind of tuning in every week or every time I uploaded a chapter, I was like, man, I kind of need to take this seriously. There are hundreds of people, thousands of people kind of tuning in on a regular basis to kind of read my work. I can't just be like, oh, this is just for fun, I'm tired of it, bye. So that's when I really kind of started taking it seriously, thinking about, can I do this long term? If I can, how do I shape my life around making it, feasible for long term?
Okay, this is kind of an inside baseball question. Did you have an end in mind, or were you just kind of like, I'm writing this, we're just going with the flow, or did things just like come to you randomly? Like, talk to me a little bit about your process.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I would like to say that from the beginning I knew what the end was going to be, I didn't. I had a premise that I really liked. I had some parts of the story that I really wanted to tell in this world that I created, a couple weeks before I even started writing. And it just started from there. So from the beginning, it was more so, hey, I really like this journey. I really like this person that I created, and I want to take this journey with him. And it just kind of evolved from there.
Cool. Talking about the evolution, I really want to know, how complicated was the transition from going from this web novel to a web comic to an anime? I mean, it does not seem simple, so.
Yeah, great question. I would say, even writing a novel was hard for me. It was my first time. The Beginning After the End was my first novel that I wrote, so that in and of itself was a challenge. Going from that to a webcomic was a bigger challenge just because I don't draw. And so as much as I've read a lot of manga, I haven't drawn myself. So it was a really big learning experience where I was working alongside an artist and exchanging notes of how I depicted this character, how I imagined this character, and trying to describe what it would look like visually through words. And so that was a challenge. And the fact that there wasn't really, again, a guide on how to make a webcomic in the States, since that's so popular in more Korea and China, it was a really big learning experience for me to kind of navigate that new world without any sort of guides. And yeah, now we're here regarding the anime. That was the biggest challenge because there are so many more parties involved. There are so many team members that each have a stake in the anime. So it was really getting on this massive ship and learning how to steer this all together. Yeah.
I can see it was probably a very intense process, but do you feel accomplished seeing how far this property has expanded? Or are you still kind of whoa, is this happening?
To be honest, even while I was handing in my notes for the anime scripts back to the director, and I was, giving revisions and talking with the team, I was still is this really happening? Is this really going to come out? And then it came out and I was like, huh, it really did come out. So yeah, there's a bit of a shell shock throughout every step of the way. But, through it all, it was a, tremendous experience where I learned so much, and I worked with so many people along the way that I would never have the chance to. So I think through all that, it was a great experience.
So through this interview so far, you're talking about the fans a lot, and obviously you have a massive fan base. So I wanted to know, is there anything in particular that you want them to take away from your work? Is there like a main message?
Ooh, let me think about that. I mean, the book itself is almost 2 million words long, so I should have a message, right? I would say that, in the beginning, the world that I created, the journey of Arthur, who, was a king that was, usually really isolated, in an isolated position, and experiencing this new world with family and loved ones. I wanted to create a world and journey where people can just tune into and kind of get lost in it. Wherever their walks of life had taken them, whatever stage of life they're in, I kind of wanted to create a place where they can always just enjoy the ride and kind of see the struggles as well as the great things that happen to Arthur. So no like strict lesson that I wanted to say, impart. Maybe the world is world is a shade of gray. There's no super right and super wrong way of living, and that's kind of what I had Arthur experience throughout the journey of the beginning after the end.
Oh, I love that. And, just speaking about your fans some more, you interact with your fans. Has there ever been any feedback that really stood out to you from them?
Well, in the beginning stages when I first started writing, when I uploaded the chapter to Royal Road and it was online for everyone to see, there would be a lot of dedicated fans that just read right as it came out and left comments. And so in those days when I myself wasn't sure where I was taking this story, I read a lot of those feedback out, and that made me think a lot about, what direction do I want to take this story? Where do I want to have Arthur's next sort of leg of his adventure in? So back then, that was a big part of my process. Right now, though, because I have the ending in mind and I know what I need to cover, I'm kind of sticking to that. But I still read the comments every time I upload a chapter, so it's still the same mold on that.
Cool. And then we talked about this a little bit earlier, but going from novel to comic, were there any design elements that you felt like this needs to be included? Was there any inspiration from comics or manga or movies, anything like that, when you were like, okay, we're turning this into a comic, we're turning this into an anime, it needs to be like this?
Well, I think that the studio for the anime did a good job in adapting it from the comic itself. But when I was first making the comic with Fuyuki, some of the things that I really wanted to ensure was Arthur being a bit striking in appearance. The red hair, the blue eyes, making that very noticeable. And that's just because he got that from his parents. He got his hair color from his mom and his eye color from his dad. So kind of portraying that was like the biggest thing. And aside from that, every time a new character was being created, Fuyuki and I went through a lot of back and forth on, me setting references along with descriptions of like how it should look. And so a lot of back and forth that I honestly don't remember a lot of.
I am very intrigued to hear that you had heavy involvement with it, because sometimes people will hand over their work and just kind of like be hands off. Was that very important to you?
Right, so, it was very important to me, but it's not something that every creator gets a chance to do, like you said, right? So I was very fortunate that the director of ACAT and, the one directing TBATE, he was very receptive of my notes. Even though there may be creative differences along the way and he may not be able to use all of my notes, he was very receptive of like all the comments that I wrote down in the scripts, and he and his team were very good in explaining why they decided to go a different direction, or why my notes were really good and they wanted to do that.
Okay, cool. This is just a silly fan question, but what are your favorite anime, manga, comics? Like, what comes to your head first? I read so much when I was younger that it kind of changed over time.
But one that kind of always comes back to my mind that it's not a really popular one. Not many people might know this, but it's a darker sort of action manga called Holy Land. It's on its surface, it's like, you know, about a kid that was getting bullied, learning how to fight. But you know, it explores the darker side of that thing, of that theme, and so that was something that kind of that I keep going back to over time and just kind of reread. But yeah, no, there's so many that are so great that I can't really name them all.
To be honest, it's like an amalgamation to me. Like, I see Berserk sometimes, I see The Eminence in Shadow sometimes. It's very comedic, but then it also has these very serious moments. Was that important to you that, you know, like, hey, I kind of want it to be a balance of all these things? Or the one thing I really love about your story is it feels familiar and like a warm blankie. I don't know if that sounds strange to you, but yeah.
I'm glad that it feels that way. It was my intention, you know, going back to our previous question about, you know, what lesson I wanted to impart. You know, it was really about creating a world that people can use as a warm blanket, so to speak. So, you know, borrowing tropes and themes from very popular comics and kind of putting my own twist to it, you know, sending my own message through that. That was an intention from the start.
Okay, cool. This is kind of a deeper question. You know, this has definitely been a journey. Have you found any part of the journey to be really difficult, and how did you overcome that?
Ooh, I feel like part of my brain just wants to forget about all the difficult parts. So I'm gonna need some time to fish them out. Yeah, what hardships? Everything was,
it was easy.
Rainbows and unicorns to me.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I would say throughout the journey of, you know, writing the novel to the webcomic to the anime, there were always kind of difficulties along the way, whether it's like my own life, whether I had struggles in my own life, or when I had struggles in regards to writing or adapting the beginning after the end. But I think each of those challenges sort of shaped me in a way where I have thicker skin now. I'm able to kind of look at it from a big picture. The beginning after the end really has been a marathon for 10 years now. It's not a sprint. So all those kind of hurdles and obstacles on the way, I just kind of now realize that, hey, you know, it's just something you have to pick yourself up from and dust off and just keep going. So suffice to say, I've had hardships. I choose not to remember or dwell on them. So
do you ever have little art being like, you can do it?
I haven't thought about that, but maybe I do. I just didn't realize myself.
I love that. Okay, so obviously I am holding the physical comic right now. Everyone is just very excited that it has an anime adaptation as well. So, physical novel, is that coming?
Yeah, I mean, fans have been asking about this for a while now, and I've been purposely sort of, you know, going around it. I think with the comic adaptation as well as the anime adaptation, I mentioned that I was part of the ship and I was helping steer the ship, but I wasn't just by myself, right? And so I wanted to do something that I've always wanted to do, something that I can like really dig into and kind of have full control over. And so I can finally sort of announce, and if you haven't been at the panel yet, I've announced it there, but the print novel is coming out. And so we're gonna do a Kickstarter run from the start, or we're gonna do a Kickstarter run in the beginning, and those additions are gonna be something that I'm gonna be pouring my heart into, making sure that it's perfect, and it's gonna be for my fans who have been waiting for this version for so long. And then after that, after the Kickstarter run, we will distribute kind of worldwide.
Okay, I have an interesting question for you. Just hearing about this Kickstarter run, it just made me think, there's so many aspiring writers out there and they feel like, I can't break into the system, this is too hard for me. I feel like you are very self-made in a way, that you've been like, hey, I'm gonna make this happen, you know? Is there any advice you have for aspiring writers, and maybe you could reflect on your own journey and remember seeing those walls or obstacles and how you overcame them?
That's a great question. You know, as much as I would like to give a one-size-fits-all answer, you know, the field has sort of changed since I first started writing, right? This was 10 years ago, so, you know, my journey might not be the most optimal way or the best way to start a journey for a new writer. But I will say that whatever platform or publisher you go to, the beginning of it all needs to start from the novel itself, right? The book itself. And so many writers are so, like, they're so tied up on what's the best route to take in order for it to be a success, that their story, the world that they're creating through the story, is sort of taking a back seat. And while obviously, you know, the business side of things is so important, that's not something that you'll have full control over. I don't have full control over like half of the deals that are being made. But what I do have full control over is the writing that I do. And so starting from there and, you know, letting good things come your way, I think that's the best thing. You know, it might sound a little optimistic. It might not always work out, but I think that gives you the best shot.
I love that answer. Leave your heart open. You know, you never know what's going to happen, right? This is kind of a fan question for me, to be honest. So when you saw art for the first time, like drawn out, what were you like, this is art? Or were there a lot of iterations of art?
I mean...
And what did it feel like when you were like, this is art? I don't know. I just want to know.
It's tricky because when Arthur was first drawn, we drew a newborn Arthur. We drew a 2-year-old Arthur, 3-year-old Arthur, and, you know, babies in that age, they don't really look very distinct, right?
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was just kind of getting the anatomy and like the kind of facial features kind of right. But as Arthur kind of grew into like middle school, high school age, that's when we were like, okay, let's lock down the hairstyle, you know, these type of bangs. And then when he got his like signature longer hair look that's tied back, that's where like, okay, this is gonna be the sort of look that he's going through. And it might change, it might be tweaked throughout seasons, throughout his journey, but like, this is the look that he's always gonna come back to.
Was there any of the characters that they showed you like, hey, this is what we want, and then you're like, no, we're doing this?
Fortunately, you know, I've been the one that was the one that kind of started this this conversation on, like, you know, I would give the description of the characters and like some references. So I didn't really have too many of those instances. I would say maybe more so like the side characters, you know, the ones that aren't as pivotal to the story. I would let the artist kind of take a crack at it first, you know. And so sometimes when he's like, okay, this side character kind of looks too similar to this character, we'll kind of change that. But nothing beyond that.
When you got this, I believe this is volume 1, when you first saw this, what was it like seeing them all come to life like that? Do you remember that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it because I got the, you know, Yen Press sent me a copy, but I also, you know, purposely went to a Barnes & Noble and I just kind of saw it on a bookshelf. So that was always a kind of checkbox I wanted to tick off, right? It was like walking into my book and seeing it on a shelf. So that feeling was really cool. You know, it really made me feel, oh, you know, this is really happening. This isn't just a hobby anymore. This is something that, you know, I did. But yeah, it was a great feeling.
Aww. Okay, my last question is, do you have anything you want to say to the fans?
I talk to my fans on a regular basis, so, you know, I hope that there isn't too much that I need to say, but, you know, as always, I really want to thank everyone for their support since the beginning. You know, it's been almost 10 years now. You know, it'll be 10 years this October, and it's been a very long marathon, but, you know, from the novel to the comic, now to the anime, and even the print novel coming out as well. You know, so many things have happened along the way. So, you know, thank you for sticking through with me. And, you know, I hope there's a lot more to come. You know, this is just the start, right? With the anime now launching this, I hope this is just the start.
The beginning?
The beginning. Exactly.
TurtleMe, thank you so much. And The Beginning After the End is available on yenpress.com. See y'all next time.
Thank you.